Michael Vonden, and welcome back to Medieval Art. I'm Dr. Bryan Keene, and I'm really excited to begin a new conversation about Amazon Prime's Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2, with fellow fans of Tolkien and the Middle Ages, with one of my favorite discussants, Dave Lewis of Cinemillennials, on Instagram and YouTube. And Dave, there's been a lot that's happened in our lives over the last, year and a half or so. We've both entered a new decade. You were married. Congrats to you and Alex. You both look great. Your ring is stunning. And,
Thank
and
you.
we have so much to discuss in terms of the show. So where do you want to begin in this sort of catching up and moving forward?
Honestly, it's really hard to decide what to start with. There's so many things that we've seen in the teaser trailers, the trailer itself. So I think the main thing that I want to start with, though, is how I feel like you and I feel the same way, Brian, is that the showrunners and writers have listened to the criticisms. There were a lot of criticisms. The main criticism that I think both you and I had was the creation of the three rings before we saw any of the creation of the other rings, and the lack of relationship between Sauron or Halbrand and Celebrimbor. That's the thing that I'm most excited for in this season, and it looks like that's what we're getting a lot. We're seeing the introduction of Anatod. We're seeing the whole kind of thing of the sharer of gifts. That was an interesting change, but there's so many things. I think the thing that I'm hoping for the most is this introduction of that we're seeing in the trailer where Galadriel is explaining who Sauron is with Círdan, Elrond, and Gil-galad. I think we're gonna get a really cool backstory there with that creepy crawly monster kind of thing that we get. I think that's Sauron's spirit, and then we're gonna get into Anatar and Celebrimbor's relationship from there, and the creation of the rings in Eregion. How about you? What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, it's really exciting. I think you're right. There were those criticisms from the first season. We also had those real joyous moments where we felt like we're in a familiar place, and yet they're taking us into new areas of the lore and the realm, and we're really staying close to the lore as fans, and then seeing this sort of realm open up with Amazon sort of adaptation. I think for me, in watching the trailers, I was just so excited to see what feel like nods to fans. I mean, we're already getting hints at Narvi that we've seen in the Empire spreads and photos online. We're getting the Barrow Whites, which is a really exciting addition because we missed them in the Peter Jackson series. Of course, most exciting, I think, is Tom Bombadil. Finally, we get this great fan favorite. He seems really serious in the trailer so far. I really jumpy, playful Tom. How do you feel about Tom so far?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that. I mean, especially since this is who Tom is. I mean, and it's like the same kind of criticisms that a lot of people had with Galadriel and her character, where people said that, oh, she's supposed to be, this stoic, graceful, beautiful, merciful figure, not this angry kind of commander of these armies and things like that, when that's completely incorrect. But it's really interesting to see how this is going to happen. I think, with the more Astari that we have with Kieran Hines possibly being a Astari himself, I think maybe this is going to be seeing a different side of Tom Bombadil. I think we're going to see this whole kind of Maya side, if you will, with Tom. And I think maybe this whole kind of thing with Tom and the Lord of the Rings that we know is just a facade. Maybe there are some deceptions within the good Vala and Maya of Middle Earth. So I think that's definitely something that's going to be a big, big theme for this. I mean, they have it all over the trailers and things like that. I think that's one of the largest overarching theme that we're going to be getting. Maybe in the trailers, we're getting something that we actually aren't getting. I know there's some kind of rumors of people having false names in the casting as well. So I think that's something that's going to be a really cool thing. I think we're going to possibly even get more races here. Some people think that we're going to get more of the, who is it? Hamul, I think is the name. We're going to get an origin story for one of the Witch Kings of the Proto Haradrim, which would be really cool. So I think there's a lot of things that we're really finally getting into the meat and potatoes of the overarching story here.
I agree with you, and I think the further we expand outward from the realms that we know so well, I think we are going to get new characters and storylines and races. I mean, just spending time in Rune is going to be really exciting as we follow the Stranger and Nori. And I think even piecing together the Stranger's storyline, is this really Gandalf, as they've led us to believe with some of these hints from the Peter Jackson series? Or could this be one of the Blue Wizards who then passes down his knowledge and time with the Harfeet to Gandalf later? I mean, I think there is a possibility to take that fan criticism of, well, Gandalf shouldn't have been here in the Second Age. But of course, it doesn't have to be Gandalf. That level of deception could be on us, the fans, going into season 2 or 3, 4, and 5, right? Knowing that we have these ultimate, eventual series coming along. I was also really excited to see spiders, maybe a reference to Shelob, or Shelob's children. Of course, the Balrog, which is exciting. In addition, we had an Entwife, which is really great. A first reference, right? I mean, I know you were
Yeah.
excited too.
I think that's like one of the biggest things that like people like us, major Tolkien fans, were freaking out over. Any type of reaction that I saw, anytime that came up, people were freaking out. It's like, yes, an Entwife. And maybe, just maybe, because I think I actually did talk about this when we talked like way like 2 years ago when we were first seeing the stranger and Nori in Rune. I thought that maybe we're seeing the Endwives here. Maybe we're seeing the destruction, the creation of the Brownlands, and there's just so many things here that it's going to be so interesting how they're going to fit everything together. Some of these things are what a lot of people and myself are kind of concerned with. Like, you have the whole topic of the timeline compression, and obviously that has to happen, but we're getting a lot of really interesting hints for things to come. Like we're seeing possibly the rise of Ar-Pharazôn. We're definitely seeing the sack of Eregion. So it's going to be really interesting going forward how they're packing all of these kind of things in.
I just wonder, since season 1 siege or season 3 to really focus on the realms of men, focusing on the nine, since we have that line in the trailer, give me the nine. I could see season 3 focus on the nine, and then season 4, maybe the fall of Numenor officially that we've seen hinted at, and then season 5, leave that for the final siege, right? Where we sort of take on Sauron, the last alliance of men and of elves. That could be a sequencing, and that could fill in some gaps rather nicely. I know we also have an Eagle of Manwë arriving, which is really exciting. We'll see how that fits in with Pharazôn's story. There's just so much that will happen in the coming weeks and months. Any other sort of last little bits before? I know we'll have a lot more conversation before we lead into the season itself, but any other thoughts or impressions, if you will, before we lead into the show?
Just overall, I think we're gonna be on a wild ride. I think a lot of people are expecting things that aren't gonna happen, and I think there's gonna be things that we could have never predicted. I think with in terms of our ideas of with the show being about medievalisms and things like that, I think it's really interesting that they're kind of going away from a lot of um medievalist kind of looks for a lot of things. I think a lot of the armor and arms are going into a vastly different direction from what they were going to season one. We're seeing a lot more bulkier, more less superhero kind of arms and armor and things like that. But I think it's really interesting to see where we're going to go from here and how things are developing from here on out.
I fully agree. I mean, those medievalisms really always jump out at me when they're present, but also the deviations, as you say, from the medievalisms do also stand out because, after all, we are in a fantasy world. So I'll be excited to see some familiar characters from the lore, some new characters like Arondir, who we've not yet mentioned at this point, but I know we've seen in lots of great imagery. This is the moment when we will all be deceived by the rings of power and leading into this force gathering to fight the evil of Sauron. So, Dave, thank you so much again. I look forward to our many, many conversations to come. And with that, we'll see each other again soon.